Biden and Kamala Harris have vowed to take away your Second Amendment rights through gun bans, gun confiscation, and government regulations. Now, Joe Biden is no longer hiding his real intentions, and we need you to take action now.
Whether it's a 9mm pistol or whether it's a rifle is ridiculous. I'm continuing to push to eliminate the sale of those things. But
the Biden administration is coming after your right to own any gun, and we need you to text PROTECT2A to 888-762-0221. Joe Biden has already issued executive orders. He is now demanding Congress push through radical gun legislation. You can fight back to stop Joe Biden's gun grab, but you must text PROTECT2A to 888-762-0221. Take action to protect your right to keep and bear arms. We urgently need millions of Americans to text PROTECT2A to 888-762-0221. Text PROTECT2A to 888-762-0221.
Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Daily Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today, as he does every Friday, Alex Uli of the Uli Law Offices in Indiana. Alex, thanks for coming by again today, man.
Yeah, great to be with you, Paul.
So today, before we get into the planned topic, and I promoted this as we were getting ready to go live. Our planned topic today is red flag laws, and we've got a lot to say about that. It'll take up probably every bit of time we have and then some. But before we get to that, we got a couple topics I really wanted to cover from the legal standpoint. First of all, Justice Breyer, it came out this week, Justice Breyer is retiring. Whether it's his decision or not is kind of up to debate, but it came out this week. Justice Breyer is retiring at the end of this term. And Breyer's not exactly the Second Amendment's biggest fan, so no matter who replaces him, it's not exactly a loss for the Second Amendment community. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'd agree. But for the fact that whoever replaces him will obviously be in his position for potentially decades, so it extends the sort of anti-Second Amendment role that he filled previously or currently, and we'll see who gets appointed, but it certainly won't be a pro-Second Amendment person by any stretch. I know Joe Biden has said that he would nominate a black woman, and I've heard speculation about who that might be, and I'm not familiar with their particular record on the Second Amendment or whether they've made any significant decisions regarding the Second Amendment, but I doubt that they'll be friends to the Second Amendment nonetheless. So,
well, in today's world, Beto O'Rourke could all of a sudden declare himself a black woman, and he'd be eligible to be nominated.
That's right. Yeah, it's a bizarre world, and that's a great point. One thing I'll say about Justice Breyer is that and this is a point in his favor, is that he did not advocate to expand the Supreme Court. As a lot of folks may recall, that was a big issue when Joe Biden took office. There was this big push to expand the Supreme Court and add more liberal justices to the court. But Breyer opposed that, and he said because that would run the risk of making the court more political and casting doubt on the legitimacy of the court in the eyes of the public. So I'll say that in favor of him, but he's certainly not been pro-Second Amendment or pro-freedom in that regard. As a matter of fact, in the Heller decision from 2008, he wrote a dissenting opinion, and in that case, he basically said that you didn't have a right to possess a firearm or a handgun in your home, which was the main issue in that case. So if that's certainly an anti-Second Amendment stance to take. And he also advocated for an interest balancing approach to the Second Amendment. And that's going to be an issue in the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin case. What sort of scrutiny or standard of review should apply to Second Amendment challenges? Should it be subject should our Second Amendment rights be subject to an interest balancing test where the interest of the government in preventing crime is balanced with, and promoting safety is balanced with individual rights? Or should we look at the text, history, and tradition and protect individual liberty despite what government interest there may be? And Breyer was clearly on the side of the interest balancing approach and advocated an approach that almost always favored the government interest, supposed government interest, over individual liberty.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we have not heard. There's one name that, and we talked about this yesterday. There are two names that I've heard, and one name that I've heard consistently being mentioned as being possible nominee. The two names that I've heard have been Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris, and the one that I've heard consistently being named is Kamala Harris. And we had a discussion yesterday, and the reasoning for that is simply they want Kamala Harris off the ticket should there be a ticket for Biden to lead in 2024. So, Diane, and by the way, I want to mention, if you want to get in on the conversation, please comment on either the Facebook or the YouTube feed, and we'll get your comments up, and we'll discuss them on the air. Diane over on the Facebook side says, whoever Biden picks, they will not uphold the Constitution. It'll be more like changing the Constitution. Yeah. Legislating from the bench, I think, is where Diane is headed with that. And liberal justices do tend to do that. That's where we got Roe v. Wade.
Yeah. There's this tension between viewpoints on how to interpret the Constitution, and Breyer and other liberal justices often take the viewpoint that the Constitution is a living document and is meant to evolve and change over time and be interpreted by justices, whereas justices like Gorsuch or the former Antonin Scalia or Clarence Thomas even believe that we should interpret the Constitution in terms of its original meaning, the original intent, and try to be faithful to that, so that we have consistency over time. And if people want to amend the Constitution, then they should those amendments should be made through the appropriate legislative process.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and let's start talking a little bit about red flag laws, like we were our plan was for the topic this week. What led to this? I found a story a little while back about a particular case in Florida. And Florida is one of the states. Let me put this graphic up. I found a story, or a graphic, which states have red flag laws. They're all up on your screen right now. Basically, with the exception of Illinois and Indiana, that's kind of on the coast, all of the West Coast border states and Nevada, and then a good number of the East Coast states, and then, again, Illinois and Indiana, and then Colorado and New Mexico in the center. But those are the states that have red flag laws. There's a Florida case that I want to highlight a little bit. A gentleman was in a family court case, was issued a summons to appear in a red flag case, and then all of a sudden court date comes up. He shows up, and unbeknownst to him, at the beginning of the whole COVID thing, they changed it to online, didn't tell him about it. Well, he wasn't online, so they said, well, he decided not to show up. But he was there at the actual courtroom instead of online. So he all of a sudden loses his gun rights for a year and is spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars trying to get them back, despite the fact that he was there and ready to represent himself.
These are one of the main concerns with red flag laws to begin with is due process, right? Because these operate to take away your rights and then give you due process later, which is the total reverse of the Constitution and the way that we understand our rights. That the government should have the burden to prove that our rights should be taken before they're actually taken, and that should be determined by an independent tribunal, and we should have an opportunity to testify and present evidence before our rights are taken away. But these red flag laws operate to take our rights away first, and in this case, it's even worse because the guy tried to appear in court and did appear in court in person, but wasn't aware that court would be taking place virtually by video. And his rights were taken away because the judge said he apparently didn't care because he didn't show for court virtually. And I tell you, it's interesting that you proposed this story this week, because just this week I had a court date in Southern Indiana that was virtual, and I had no idea how to appear myself. And I'm the attorney, so I'm calling around trying to figure out how I have to appear for court, because in the midst of the pandemic, courts have operated much differently around the state, and it depends on not only county to county, but even courts within the counties operate differently depending on the judge. So it's very difficult to know how to appear for court, whether it's in person, whether it's by video, is it by Zoom, is it by Microsoft Teams, what link am I using, what code am I using to get in? I mean, it's very difficult to access the courts these days. So this story kind of highlights that.
Well, if any attorney can get in virtually, we know you can, because you appear here every week. So,
yeah, but you send me the link and the code, and the courts don't. So,
yeah.
So I have to track that down.
Absolutely. Well, and I want to talk a little bit about the red flag laws and why they are a bad idea. And I've said this before on the air, but I think it bears repeating. Why a red flag laws? If you think somebody is dangerous enough, you need to take their firearms away. But then isn't it dangerous? Aren't they dangerous enough that they need to be locked up, period? Because let's think about it. You're taking their firearms away. That's going to upset them to start with. Yet you're leaving them with keys to things like pickup trucks and U-Haul rental trucks, and access to things like, I don't know, 55-gallon drums where they can go to gas stations, or they can go to farm supply stores and get fertilizer, and then go to truck stops and get diesel fuel. That's what took down a Murrah building in Oklahoma City, is just diesel fuel and fertilizer. That's the big explosive right there. It's called ANFO. You can do a whole lot of damage without using firearms if you've just got a little bit of knowledge and some anger. You're taking away one weapon and leaving a very torqued off and somebody you think is mentally unstable. I think you're doing much more harm than good through these red flag laws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. They focus so much on the firearm, and to the exclusion of all these other things that could be potentially harmful if the person is really a danger to themselves or others. Mm-hmm. And the other problem with these is that, like we talked about earlier, the problem with due process, but these extreme risk protection orders, or red flag laws, are meant to keep firearms out of the hands of dangerous people, which I get. That's a problem, and that's a problem that should be addressed. But most states have civil commitment orders, so there are other ways to address these sorts of problems if a person is really dangerous to themselves or others, and honestly, mechanisms that are more effective if they're utilized correctly. Because, as you say, these red flag laws only focus on the firearm and not anything else. So that's a real problem. The other thing is that some states states that have red flag laws operate differently in terms of who can make the report that somebody is dangerous to themselves or others. Some states, it's only law enforcement that can make that report. Others, it's family members or other individuals. And that's a process that can be abused. So if it's a domestic situation and a girlfriend is mad at her boyfriend and wants to get back at him, she can make an allegation that he's dangerous and have his firearms taken away. And then he has to go to court to prove that he's not dangerous and that he should have his firearms back. And the problem is that judges are going to be reluctant to let people have their firearms back because they don't want to have blood on their hands, so to speak. So, and since it's a civil case, you don't have a right to an attorney. So you're either going to have to represent yourself or you're going to have to hire an attorney at your expense, and that can be extremely expensive. So these are ripe for abuse.
Yeah, I'm going to go off on that for just a second. The one of the states, and this is off that same that same one where I put the map up, but unfortunately, when I put the website into my broadcast software, it's a very dark background. It's very hard to read the text. But that same website, and I'll put the website in the comments here in just a few minutes in both the Facebook on the YouTube side, but it gives every state that has a red flag law, and it gives who can put you up for who can report you for that red flag law and how long they last and all that, but for every state that has one. In Hawaii, who can report you? Family, household members, educators, medical professionals, co-workers, and law enforcement. Do you work with a Karen? Do you like everybody you work with? More importantly, does everybody you work with like you? In Hawaii, they darn well better. And then Hawaii, the temporary order lasts 14 days, and the final order lasts a year. So
and in Indiana, at least, I can't speak to other states, but in Indiana, if your firearms are taken and the court sets a hearing, they're supposed to set that hearing within 14 days, but the problem is you're probably not going to be ready for a hearing in 14 days. You're probably not going to be able to hire an attorney, and if you are, your attorney is not going to be ready within 14 days. So realistically, that hearing's not actually going to take place within 14 days, and your attorney's going to ask for a continuance. So you're going to be without your firearms for at least 14 days before you receive due process. So your rights have been taken away, and you're not getting due process in the court until at least 14 days later, probably more. And that's just totally the opposite of our understanding of justice. And there's this saying in the law that justice delayed is justice denied, and this is a classic example of that. And there's one command in the Bill of Rights that's mentioned twice, and that's that no one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. It's in the 15th Amendment and again in the 14th Amendment. So it seemed kind of important to the founders that due process be protected. And these red flag laws go directly against that concept and reverse that. Okay, so they balance the government interest and safety against individual liberty and make you get your rights back in the courts after they're taken away.
In the article about the Florida case that piqued my interest in this again, they mention a Supreme Court case that was ruled in May 21. It was Cangelia versus Strom. Involved a man arguing with his wife. She called the police and said he was acting erratically and making suicidal statements. So the police entered his home, seized the firearms without a warrant. Although the district court granted summary judgment to the police, the Supreme Court unanimously determined the seizure was a violation of the Fourth Amendment, holding that a person has a right to retreat into his home to be free from unreasonable government intrusion. The government acknowledged the case implicates red flag laws. The provisions of the laws may be challenged under the Fourth Amendment. And then it mentions the case Florida versus Jardines, but that's where it drops it. So, has anybody challenged these red flag laws into? Well, I know it hasn't gotten to the Supreme Court, but is it on its way?
I think it will come before the Supreme Court eventually. And as you say, the Supreme Court acknowledged that it implicates red flag laws and almost implicitly invited a challenge. And I hope that a case like that does get to the Supreme Court, because not only is it a problem with the Fifth and the 14th Amendment due process clause like we've talked about, but there's an issue there with the Fourth Amendment, because under the Fourth Amendment we're supposed to be free from unreasonable search and seizure without probable cause, and here there's not a determination of probable cause until after the fact. So you're subject to a search or seizure without a finding of probable cause until after the fact, and I think that's very problematic, as the court in Coniglia versus Strom acknowledged. So we'll see what happens with the Supreme Court. I'm optimistic that after the court is, I think actually to some extent the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin case may give us a barometer on the court in terms of how they will treat firearms related cases, and maybe to some extent a barometer on how they may rule in something like a red flag law case.
I want to go in a little bit of a different direction here, and I was just scanning, and in the states that have red flags laws, in more than half of them, family can put you up for a red flag confiscation. Here's the danger I see with that, and I remember going back several years in the Polite Society podcast. I had a rather lengthy interview of Jeff Knox of the Firearms Coalition, and Jeff brought up to me, and at the time we weren't talking red flag laws, we were talking about the goodness, my brain is not working. The amendment, the Lautenberg Amendment, where if you have a protection order that bars you from buying a gun. And the red flag law has a danger of getting the same weaponization. If your spouse, soon to be ex-spouse, knows you are a firearms enthusiast, knows you have several firearms, maybe some of them very expensive, knows that you enjoy firearms, guess what they're going to do? They're going to run to their attorney and say, my husband is suicidal. They're going to take their gun and hurt themselves. Even if it's a bald-faced lie, they're going to use that, and they're going to get you put up on red flags. There go your guns for a year at minimum. And in a lot of states, and I remember seeing this, what state, I don't remember what state it was, but earlier today, I believe it was Michigan, wants to make it a law that any guns confiscated will not be, that any guns they confiscate don't get sold to the public, meaning when they take a gun from a criminal, they want those guns destroyed, whereas currently they have to be sold to the public. Think of what happened. I mean, I could just imagine some states taking these red flag law guns, and all of a sudden, whoops, they got destroyed. Yeah. I could easily see that happening.
Yeah, a lot of the discussion around these red flag laws is everybody seems to be okay with the initial denial of due process, but then the question is, how much due process are we going to give them after the fact? And some states say you can't get your guns back for a year, some at 6 months. Sometimes you can't get your guns back at all, and they're destroyed. So it's kind of fighting over how much we can infringe on your rights after the fact. But I will say in Indiana, there has been some good news. Indiana does have a red flag law, which is not good in my opinion. And Indiana has had a red flag law since 2004 or 2005. And red flag laws really didn't take off until after the Parkland school shooting in Florida. I believe there were only 5 states that had red flag laws before that incident. But Indiana now has a provision that says that police departments have a duty to store seized firearms so that they will not be damaged and that they're liable for damage caused by negligent handling and storage of the firearm. So at least there's that provision. That's one good thing I can say about Indiana's red flag law, is that there's a provision to at least protect the firearms that are seized so that they're in the same condition they were in when they were seized when the person gets them back.
Todd, I believe, has extra sensor. He has ESP because, whoops, I wanted to get that. I didn't do that. Got the wrong button there. Todd on the Facebook side wanted to know who pays for the storage of ERPO guns. I guess that would depend on the what state you're in, when they get confiscated. In Indiana, does the state pay for the storage, or?
Yeah. Although the person can petition, so if the person is deemed to be dangerous in Indiana, the person can petition the court to transfer the firearm to a responsible third party by written agreement. So they can ask that it be given to a family member. They can petition for it to be transferred to an FFL for storage or for sale. There are a number of options, but the default is that the law enforcement agency is responsible for storing the firearm, and that's at the expense of the state.
Okay. Well, I know, how do I put this? I'm going to try to put this as gently as I can. I know several law enforcement officers. I'm friends with several law enforcement officers. Not all law enforcement officers are gun people, and not all law enforcement officers I know are gun people. Not all law enforcement officers I know take really spectacularly good care of their firearms they're issued. So I certainly hope that all firearms that are in the care of law enforcement get more care than these particular law enforcement officers take care of the ones that they are issued.
Yep. That's the idea, but it'll be hard to show, what was the condition of the firearm when it was seized versus what was the condition of the firearm when it was returned to you. I think that would be a difficult hurdle unless you have very good records and maybe even pictures of the condition of your firearm. So that could be problematic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey man, we are down. These 30-minute broadcasts go by too darn quickly, and I knew we would take up easily 30 minutes talking about red flag laws, but we're coming up on end of January. It's not time to start training in southern Indiana, is it yet?
Well, it's good to do some cold weather training because you never know when you're going to have to use your firearm, and it's good to be familiar with it even when your hands are freezing. So it's good to get out and shoot. In fact, the local club where I sometimes shoot is having their last match before they have to sell their property. They lease their property from a former, it's a quarry company that owns the property, and the company has said they're going to sell it. So I'll try to get out to that match this weekend, hopefully, because it's the last one on that property. It's been open for 70 years, I believe, so it's going to be a...
So they're going to sell the hole in the ground.
They're going to sell the hole in the ground, exactly.
All right, well, good luck to them for that.
Yeah.
Coming up in southern Indiana, really big swimming pool.
Exactly. Yeah, for $3 million, I heard is the price. So somebody's going to have to fill a big hole if they want to get their money back out of it.
I'm telling you. All right. Well, Alex, thanks again. As always, fascinating to talk with you, man.
Yeah, it was great to be with you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
And we'll, folks, if you would please hit the like button and share the show with a friend. If you just happen to stumble on us, please subscribe, especially if you happen to stumble on us through podcast. We really thank you for joining us. Please subscribe and come join us again next week if you're catching us live on video, 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, right where you found us, right here.